Call it. Heads. Self-confidence has nothing to do with self-importance. It has a lot to do with open-mindedness and the capacity to love. Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Isto. You've reached chapter 19 of Tarot Tales, the penultimate chapter in this book, season 2. Before I dive into my normal getting ready speech, telling you all about the drinks and all the setups, I do want to encourage you to go and grab a pencil, markers, paper, something to write on, something to doodle with. I don't have any figurines or anything to act out this week. We are going to be delving into a really popular story dealing with creativity, and so I'd like to encourage you to listen and create as we go. Those of you that were with me last week know that this week we are talking about the star, which is this card right here. Now, there's a lot of symbolism inherent in this card. First of all, it's a major apocrypha card, pretty near the complete set. It's following right after the Tower, and it's got kind of this calming, creative energy. We've got 7 stars up here, and then this main star in the center. Here on the side, we've got a ibis, which is an Egyptian bird that apparently represents intelligence and wisdom. Then we have the main attraction here, the star herself, 1 foot in the water, which, as we have discussed in our previous stories, that the water is representing this kind of like feeling, emotional, creative space. And then we have the ground here, and she's got 1 foot in both, 1 foot firmly planted here and 1 foot firmly immersed in the water. And this represents the more physical realm. Now, she's pouring water from this creative space into the more physical realm. And if you can see, without burning more of my arm hair, that stream actually divides into 5 different little streams, which some have theorized symbolizes the 5 senses. And I actually really, really like that for this card because it does have this sense of inspiration around it. We're pulling things from the feelings, rooting them in the reality, and then feeling them through those kind of 5 different spaces. So we've got this idea of hope, inspiration, accomplishment, feeling a drive, feeling kind of complete and whole. And upside down, we're feeling like we don't have inspiration, we don't have a direction, listless, confused, despairing. So we are going to touch on both sides of this with today's story. When I started reading about this card and I learned that it was inspiration, it gave me the idea that maybe I could do something with the Muses, because that's something that I so desperately have wanted to do. But it turns out that the Muses actually don't have a lot of really meaty backstories. And so that led me to the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, Orpheus being the son of one of the Muses. So that has, well, I'll leave a little bit more exposition till after the story. Before we dive into all of that, I do want to talk about the drinks for this week. You'll notice that I've got the 5 streams for that same kind of symbolism that I was enjoying before. Those of you that drink alcohol, we have a cocktail called the Artist's Muse. It's a pisco drink, which I think is going to be lovely. I'm not drinking that this evening, but I am drinking the Calliope, which is this lemon verbena kind of lemonade type drink. So regardless if you're drinking with me now or not, whether you're watching this live or later, simply for being here, I say a hearty thank you and cheers. Ooh. Made it a little too tart. Okay, before I dive into the story, kind of like last week's episode, or I guess 2 weeks ago's episode, I'm going to cover a couple of different vocab words up front because the story that we're actually doing is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, which, true to the theme of creativity, Let me tilt that a little so you guys can get a better view. True to the theme of creativity and inspiration has been recreated again and again and again by a number of different artists over the years. And so I actually found two versions that I had never heard of that I thought were really, really fascinating, and I've stitched them together. So we've got two poems. One by a man named Robert Henryson, and this was in the kind of late 1400s. And then I'm going to give you a poem called Orpheus Eurydice and Hermes by Rilke, which is just this really beautiful haunting. And it kind of talks about their journey out of the underworld. I think they go really well together, but I don't want to break it up. And so I do want to cover some of the things that you may hear me speak, just so you know what the hell I'm talking about. Which brings me to this book that I hope is something that was maybe a part of your childhood as well. I was obsessed with this book. And unfortunately, I don't have the crinkle plastic cover with Apollo on the front of it. But maybe you will recognize some of these images. This gorgeous stuff. This is D'Aulaire's Greek Myths. And I would just spend hours looking at this. So I pulled this out because we are going to start off our story, our poem, talking about the Greek gods and goddesses. And so just a little refresher, we have Gaia down here, this kind of mountain range, who gave birth to a number of the original Titans. And then over here, we have Mnemosyne, which is going to be referred to as the goddess of memory, Memoria. And she mated with her nephew, Zeus, otherwise known as Jupiter. And the theory goes that they had sex 9 nights in a row, and then they gave birth to these 9 muses, which I'm going to dive into from right to left. Muses, hear my plea. We have Erato, who is the muse of lyrics. We have Euterpe, which is the muse of music. We have Thalia, the muse of comedy. Melpomene, the muse of tragedy. Terpsichore, who is the muse of dance. Urania, who is the muse of astronomy. We have Clio, who is the muse of history. Polyhymnia, who is the muse of lyrics. And then finally, we have Calliope, who is the muse of epics, which is the one that you may have known. And true to form, her son is Orpheus, who by Apollo. So his son, Apollo, otherwise known as Phoebus, is going to be mentioned a couple of different times. Anyway, this poem is going to dive into all of the muses. So I wanted to make sure you heard their names at least once before we got started. The only other thing that's worth talking about, and this is my little cardboard shout out for all of you, is the Furies, otherwise known as the Erinyes. You may have not heard of them. They're not really, they don't really get covered much in this Greek myths book, but we have these 3, which is Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone, which is endless anger, jealous rage, and vengeful destruction. Fun fact about how the Furies came to be. Apparently, when Kronos castrated his father, he threw it into the ocean, and then the Furies and the giants and all of these other terrible mythological creatures sprung out of the world. That's one origin story. The other one is that Pluto slept with Nox, the goddess of night, and gave birth to the Furies. We're going to see them later. I thought they were the Fates, and so I just wanted to make sure that you knew who they were. They just kind of torment and torture people. Okay, a lot of housekeeping right off the bat, and we're going to get into it soon, I promise. The only other thing that I wanted to say is that because I'm doing 2 poems, I am going to be trying to adhere to the actual scansion. So I'm going to be using words that may be like packed for packed, or consumption for consumption. And that's just to flesh out the actual rhythm to try and hold true to all of that. So in case you're like, what the heck's going on? I also translated all of this first poem from Middle English into words that I thought would keep the scansion a little bit better and help you and me stay on top of it all. All right. Oh, the final thing I should say. You're going to hear in reference to elves and fairies in the underworld. too much history to go into, but what you need to know is that this poem was written in a time when we're aware of all of these Greek epics. Christianity is on the rise, and we're dealing with all of this Germanic and general mythology from paganism that still exists. And so the way Christianity dealt with this was that they made them all demons or undead spirits. And so when we hear Persephone referred to as the goddess of the fairies, this story existed before Shakespeare, Titania, Queen Mab was more popularized, and so that would make sense. And then the undead Eurydice is going to be referred to as an elf, and so it's just kind of this wicked spirit. Okay, enough housekeeping. Thanks for sticking in there with me. Let's dive in. Take a deep breath with me. And we gotta light the star for the muses. Without further ado, chapter 19, Orpheus and Eurydice by Robert Henryson, and Orpheus Eurydice Hermes by Rilke. Upon the mountain of Helicon, the most famous of all Arabia, a goddess dwelt, excellent in beauty, gentle of blood, called Memoria, who Jupiter, that god, to wife did take, and carnally knew her, who soon after then, upon a day, bore him fair daughters 9. The first in Greek was called Euterpe, in our language, good delectation. The second maid called Melpomene, as honey sweet in melodation. Terpsichore is good instruction of everything, the third sister Awis, thus out of Greek in Latin translate is. Calliope, that maiden marvelous, the fourth sister of all music mistress, and mother to the king Sir Orpheus, who through his wife was after king of Thrace. Clio, the fifth, that now a goddess is, in Latin called meditation, of everything that has creation. The sixth sister was called Erato, who draws like to like in everything. The seventh lady was fair Polyhymnia, who could 1,000 songs so sweetly sing. Talia, after who can our souls bring, in profound wit and great agility, to understand and great capacity. Urania, the ninth and last of all, in our language, who could right expound, is called harmony celestial, rejoicing men with melody and sound. Among their 9, Calliope was crowned and made a queen by mighty god Phoebus, of whom begot this prince Sir Orpheus. No wonder 'tis that he was fair and wise, gentle and full of liberality. His father, God, in his progenitress, a goddess, finder of all harmony. When she was born, she set him on her knee and gave him suck of her 2 bosoms white, the sweet liquor of all music delight. Increasing, soon to manhood up he drew, of stature large and freely fair of face. His noble fame so far it sprang and grew, till at the last the mighty Queen of Thrace, excellent fair, abounding in riches, a message sent unto this prince so young, requiring him to wed her and be king. Eurydice, that lady had for name, and when she saw this prince so glorious, her errand to propose she thought no shame. With words so sweet and blinks so amorous, said, "Welcome, lord and love, Sir Orpheus. In this province shall ye be king and lord." They kissed then, and thus they did accord. Betwixt Orpheus and fair Eurydice, From thence were wedded, and on from day to day the love of life did kindle and increase, with mirth and blitheness, solace and with play. Of worldly joy, alas, what shall I say? Like to a flower that pleasantly will spring, which fades so soon and ends with mourning. I say, this be Eurydice the queen, who walked forth into a May morning, but with a maiden in a green meadow, to take the dew and see the flowers spring. Where in a wood near by this lady young, a blustering herdsman called Aristeus, keeping his beasties, lay under a bush. And when he saw this lady solitary, barefoot, with shanks quite whiter than snow, pricked with lust, he thought without delay her to oppress, and to her did he draw. Dreading for scathe, she flew when she him saw, and as she ran, all barefoot in a bush, she stepped onto a serpent venomous. This cruel venom was so piercing fair, as nature is of all mortal poison. In pieces small this queen's high heart did tear, and soon anon fell in a deadly swoon. Seeing this case, Persephone saw her boon, who called is the goddess infernal. Unto her court this gentle queen did call. And when she vanished was, and invisible, her maiden weeped with a woeful choir, crying with many shouts and voice terrible, until at last King Orpheus did hear. And of her cry the cause soon could he ask. She said, Alas, Eurydice, your queen, is with the fairy, ta'en before my eye. This noble king, inflamed, all in ire, and rampant as a lion ravenous, with awful look and eye, glowing as fire, demand the matter. And the maid said thus, She stepped on a serpent venomous, and fell in swoon. With that the queen of fairies clawed her up soon, and forth with her did carry. When she had spoke, the king, he sighed full sour, his heart near burst for very grief and woe. Half out of his mind, he made no tarry more, but took his harp and to the wood did go, wringing his hands, walking to and fro. While he might stand, then sat he down on a stone, and through his harp thus so he made his moan. O doleful harp with many dismal string, turn all thy mirth and music in mourning, and cease all of thy subtle songs so sweet. Now weep with me thy lord and careful king, whose losses hath in earth all his liking. And all thy game thou changed to gall and grit, thy golden strings with many tears so wet, and all my pain full to report express, crying with me in every stead and street, Where art thou gone, my love Eurydice? Him to rejoice, it played for him a spring, till that the fowls of the woods did sing, and trees danced with their leaves so green, him to devoid from his grief womenting. But all in vain, that vailed him nothing. His heart was so upon his lusty queen, the bloody tears then sprang out of his eye. There was no solace might his sobbing cease, but crying aye with cares so cold and keen, Where art thou gone, my life Eurydice? Farewell, my place, farewell, pleasance and play, and welcome wood so wild and wildsome way. My wicked way in wilderness to wear, my robe royal and all my rich array, changed shall be in rude russet and grey. My diadem into a hat of hair, my bed shall be with beaver, boar, and bear. In bushes kind with many bustious beasts, Without he sang, saying with sighing sour, "Where art thou gone, my love Eurydice? I beseech thee, my fair father Phoebus, have pity on thy own son Orpheus. Know thou not well I am thy born and child? Now hear my plaint, painful and piteous, direct me from this death so dolorous. Who goes so thus without such guilt beguiled? Let not thy face with clouds be o'ersiled. Lend me thy light, and let me not go less to find her fair in fame never defiled, my lady, queen, and life Eurydice. O Jupiter, thou god celestial, and grandster to myself, on thee I call, to mend my mourning and my dreary moan. Thou gift me force, that I not faint nor fall, till I her find, for seek her sooth I shall, and neither stint nor stand for stoke nor stone. Through thy Godhead guide me where she is gone. Make her appear, and put my heart in peace. King Orpheus thus, with his harp alone, sour weeping for his wife Eurydice. When ending were these songs lamentable, he took his harp, and on his breast did hang. Soon passed to the heaven, says the fable, to seek his wife, but that availed nothing. By Milky Way he went without delay, soon came out through the spear of Saturn old, who father is to all the storms so called. When soon he sought throughout that cold region, till Jupiter his grandsire could he find, who pitied sour his lamentation, and called his sphere be searched from end to end. She was not there, and down he did descend to Mars, the god of battle and of strife, and sought his sphere, yet got he not his wife. Then went he down to his father Phoebus, god of the sun, with beams so bright and clear. But when he saw his own son Orpheus in such a plight, that changed all his cheer, and sent anon to seek through all his fear. But all in vain. His lady came not there. He took his leave, and to Venus did fare. When he her saw, he kneeled and said thus, "Know ye not well I am your own true knight, and love none loyaler than Sir Orpheus? And ye of love, goddess, and most of might, of my lady help me to get a sight." "Forsooth," quoth she, "ye must seek furthermore." Then from Venus he took his leave no more. In his passage among the planets all, he heard a heavenly melody and sound, passing all instruments so musical, caused by rolling of the spheres so round, which harmony through all this map around, till moving cease unite perpetual, which of this world Plato the soul can call. He passed forth the space of 20 days, far and full far, and farther than I can tell. And he found straits and ready ways, till at the last, until the gate of hell he came. And there he found a porter fell, with 3 heads all, was called Cerberus, a hound of hell, a monster marvelous. Then Orpheus began to be aghast, when he beheld that ugly hellish hound. He took his harp, and on it played fast, till at the last, through sweetness of the sound, this dog did sleep, and fell down on the ground. Then Orpheus, he crossed his chest in fear, and furthermore he went, as ye shall hear. He passed forth up to a river deep, and o'er it a bridge, and on it sisters 3, who had the entry of the bridge to keep. Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone. Turned a wheel was ugly for to see, and on it spread a man named Ixion, rolling about right-winded, woebegone. Then Orpheus played a jolly spring. The 3 sisters full fast they fell asleep. The ugly wheel ceased of her whirling. Thus left was none the entry for to keep. Then Ixion out of the wheel did creep, and stole away. Was Orpheus anon, without stopping, across the bridge is gone. Not far from thence he came unto a flood, troubled and deep, that swiftly down did spin, where Tantalus, naked, full thirsty stood, and yet the water lay above his chin. And when he gaped, there would no drop come in. When he did drop, the water would descend. Thus got he not his thirst to slake, no mend. Before his face an apple hung also, fast at his mouth upon a tawdry thread. When he gaped so, it rocked to and fro, and fled as it refused him to be fed. Then Orpheus had rue of his great need. He took his harp, and fast on it did clink. The water stayed, and Tantalus got drink. Oh, dully place, and gloomy deep dungeon, furnace of fire with stink intolerable, pit of despair without remission. Thy meat venom, thy drink is poisonable. Thy greatest pains to count innumerable. Whatever creature comes to dwell in thee is ever dead and never more may die. There found he many careful queen and king, with crown on head of brass full hotly burning, who in their life right masterful had been, and conquerors of gold, riches, and land. Hector of Troy and Priam there he found, and Alexander for his wrong conquest, and Antiochus there for his foul incest, and Julius Caesar for his cruelty, and Herod with his brother's wife he saw, and Nero for his great iniquity, and Pilate for his breaking of the law. Then under this he looked and did know Crassus, that king, none mightier in mould, for greed so stuffed, yet full of burning gold. There saw he many, pope and cardinal, and holy church who did abusion, and archbishops in their pontifical, for selling men forgiveness of their sin. Abbots and men of all religion, for evil spending of their giveness rented, in flames of fire were bitterly tormented. Then furthermore he went where Pluto was, and Persephone, and hitherward he drew, I playing on his harp where he could pass, till at the last Eurydice he knew. Lean and dead-like, piteous and pale of hue, right washed and wan and withered as the weed, her lily look was like unto the lead. Quoth he, my lady loyal and my delight, full woe is me to see you changed thus. Where is your rude as rose with cheeks so white, your crystal eye with blinks so amorous, your lips so red to kiss delicious? Quoth she, as now I dare not tell today, but ye shall learn the cause another day. Quoth Pluto, sir, though she be like an elf, she has no cause to plead, and as for why, she fares as well daily as does myself, or King Herod for all his chivalry. It is languish that puts her in such cry. Were she at home in her country of Thrace, she would repair full soon in skin and face. Then Orpheus before Pluto sat down, and in his hands with his harp did take, and played many sweet proportion, with bass tones the lowest he could make, with piping notes so high the dead might wake, till at the last for rue and great pity they wept so sour that he could hear and see. Then Proserpine and Pluto bade him ask his reward, and he would have right not, but license with his wife away to pass to his country that he so far had sought. Quoth Persephone, since I her hither brought, we shall not part without condition. Quoth he, thereto I give permission. Eurydice then be the hand thou take, and pass this way, but underneath this deed, give thou a turn or blink behind thy back. We shall her have to hell for e'er again. Though this was hard, yet Orpheus agreed. So on they went, up toward the outward port, Hermes tween them, a god for their consort. This was the eerie mine of souls. Like silent silver ore, they veined its darkness. Between roots, the blood that flows off into humans welled up, looking dense as porphyry in the dark. Otherwise, there was no red. There were cliffs in unreal forests, bridges spanning emptiness, and that huge gray blind pool hanging above its distant floor like a stormy sky over a landscape. And between still gentle fields, a pale strip of road unwound. They came along this road. In front, the slender man in the blue cloak, mute, impatient, looking straight ahead, without chewing, his footsteps ate the road in big bites, and both his hands hung heavy and clenched by the pore of his garment, and forgot all about the light lyre, become like a part of his left hand, rose tendrils strung in the limbs of an olive. His mind like two minds. While his gaze ran ahead like a dog, turned, and always came back from the distance to wait at the next bend, his hearing stayed close, like a scent. At times, it seemed to reach all the way back to the movements of the two others, who ought to be following the whole way up. And sometimes it seemed there was nothing behind him but the echo of his own steps, the small wind made by his cloak. And yet he told himself they were coming. Once, said it out loud, heard it die away. They were coming. Only they were two who moved with terrible stillness. Had he been allowed to turn around just once, wouldn't that look back mean the disintegration of this whole work still being accomplished? Of course he would have seen them. Two dim figures walking silently behind. The god of journeys and secret tidings, shining eyes inside the traveler's hood, the slender wand held out in front of him, and wings beating at his ankles, and his left hand held out to her. This woman who was loved so much that from one lyre more mourning came than from women in mourning, that a whole world was made from mourning, where everything was present once again. Forest and valley and road and village, field, river, animal. And that around this mourning world, just as around the other earth, a sun and a silent, star-filled sky wheeled, a morning sky with displaced constellations. This woman who was loved so much. But she walked alone, holding the god's hand, her footsteps hindered by her long grave clothes, faltering, gentle, and without impatience. She was inside herself, like a great hope, and never thought of the man who walked ahead, or the road that climbed back toward life. She was inside herself, and her being dead filled her like tremendous depth, as a fruit is filled with its sweetness and darkness. She was filled with her big death, still so new that it hadn't been fathomed. She found herself in a resurrected virginity, her sex closed like a young flower at nightfall, and her hands were so weaned from marriage that she suffered from the light god's endlessly still guiding touch, as from too great an intimacy. She was no longer the blonde woman who sometimes echoed in the poet's songs, no longer the fragrance, the island of their wide bed, and no longer the man's to possess. She was already loosened like long hair, and surrendered like the rain, and issued like massive provisions. She was already root. And when all at once the god stopped, and with pain in his voice spoke the words, "He has turned around." She couldn't grasp this, and quietly said, "Who?" But far off in front of the bright door stood someone whose face had grown unrecognizable. He just stood and watched how on this strip of road through the field the god of secret tidings, with a heartbroken expression, silently turned to follow the form, already starting back along the same road. Footsteps hindered by long grave clothes, faltering, gentle, and without impatience. The end. So I really like these. I hope that you did too. I see that we are quite longer than most of my episodes normally are, but I just want to talk a little bit about all the things that I love in this. So first of all, the text is down below in the description. Please like and subscribe. And I've linked to all of the characters that were listed and how I just figured it was going to probably take too long to go over all the stuff at the beginning. So you can go and look at all of those characters. They're all linked to if you want to take a look. I think that this is so fascinating. So this comes like 150 years after the Inferno, so it's clearly inspired by it, right? The Henryson's is. But Rilke has all of these sonnets to Orpheus, and there was this story called Sir Orfeo that came out a little bit before this that was really fascinating. And this story just continues to inspire, and I think that that's really cool that the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, technically born from the goddess Calliope, the muse of epics, still continues on to this day, which is why I wanted to spend some time with it. And like the star, there's this incredible hope, this drive, this desire that we're moving towards. But there's also this incredible isolation that I found in the Rilke poem, in the way that Eurydice is feeling in her depth, this like lack of acceptance that Orpheus is having. You almost kind of feel good for her, or at least I do. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this. I just had so much fun learning about all of this. My gratitude for this week is to I don't know, the children's libraries, the school libraries, the libraries, Barnes and Nobles, every place that I was able to take a look at the Greek myths book growing up. I absolutely loved this, and just general accessibility of those things. Also, I used to think that these pictures were just the most impressive, but like, you look at some of these, and this guy just decided to sketch and write this book, and man, it changed my world. So I hope you created something fun during this episode. Feel free to share it on the various forms of connection down below. And as for next week, our final episode, I have the Queen of Wands reversed, which is this card with a black cat, a sunflower, and a nice powerful woman sitting on her throne. I've got a really wonderful story from the Middle East that I'm going to share with you all. I'm excited to wrap up this book next week, so stay tuned. And with that, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you treat yourself with love and respect. May you continue to grow and find the strength to persevere through the painful parts of growth. May you find inspiration all around you. And may you find peace. Thank you for joining me this week. Until next week. Bye, y'all.